All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're gonna be going over the blueprint to throwing 90 miles per hour. Now, is this absolutely everything you need to do to throw 90? No. This is a general framework of the core training principles that you should be following if your goal is to throw 90 miles per hour. Now, let's get right into it, starting off with throwing. So, first bullet I have listed. We want our throwing to be athletic focused over drill focused. Now, what does this mean exactly? Basically, a lot of pitchers get way too caught up in overcomplicating their mechanics, right? Trying all of these different mechanical drills because they think that they need to perfect their front leg or their arm needs to be perfectly at 90 degrees at foot strike. And maybe some of those things are true and some drills will help, but for the most part, drills just cause you to overthink and tense you up. So we want our throwing to be athletic. We want to move like an infielder, move like an outfielder. Why do you think that so many guys in the bigs throw hard? So many guys who pitch throw hard and were two ways all the way up until they either got drafted or made it to the pros, right? They were moving like an athlete all the time, okay? So we want to be athletically focused over drill focused. Now, next thing, long toss. It is one of the oldest tricks in the book. It's one of the most tried and true ways to actually gain velocity, and a lot of people do it wrong. So I'm going to teach you how to do it right. Basically, when you long toss on the way out, right? So when you and your partner are throwing and you're moving out, you want to keep those throws as high as possible. You want to keep those throws on an arc because you want to actually give your arm a chance to open up and stretch out fully. So basically, you want to be throwing that thing pretty high, okay? You want to be throwing the baseball high to give your arm a chance to open up so you can be fully loose and ready to go when you make max intent throws at your furthest distance. So when you actually get out to your furthest distance, what you want to do is make 5 to 10 throws at that distance, and then you want to do pull downs on the way in, okay? You want to keep those throws as low as possible as if you were an outfielder trying to gun a guy out at home plate. What this is going to do, right? Think about what we were doing on the way out. We were stretching out, we were loosening up the arm. On the way in, we want to compress our throws. We want to put them on a line. This is where the actual strength is built. This is where you mold your throwing patterns into high velocity throwing patterns, okay? And it's by forcing your body to throw at extremely high exertions on the way in from a far distance, okay? That's long toss. High output throwing, kind of a continuation of long toss, but it's a little bit different. So pulleys, basically short for pull downs. We just covered them a little bit, but sometimes you're going to have days or you're going to want to do days where you're just doing pull downs, okay? Right? And the reason we want to do this is kind of similar to why we want a long toss, in that we want to mold our throwing patterns into high velocity throwing patterns. And how do we do that? You have to throw hard more often. I know you hear it all the time. It's the age-old saying, but it really is true. You need to throw hard to throw hard, okay? So that's pull downs. You can do athletic variations of high output throws, right? For example, doing like a double play throw, like you're catching the ball from shortstop turning two, doing a pickoff high output throw, doing like a turn and burn or a shuffle throw. Basically anything to get your body used to throwing hard from different positions, right? And you might be thinking, well, why would I want to throw hard in like different positions if I'm trying to throw hard off the mound? The way you throw harder off the mound is by becoming a really good thrower, right? So if I throw over the top and I go and I can throw 93 from down here, if I train myself to get to that point, it's probably going to translate to my actual delivery, okay? The point is we want to become a great thrower, okay? So that's athletic variations. Then we have bullpens, okay? So this is gonna depend on the time of year entirely, right? So obviously if you're in season, you're not gonna be doing many high output bullpens, okay? Your bullpens are gonna be more fine-tuning the mechanics, sharpening your pitches, stuff like that, just to stay ready. But in the off season and when you're actually training velocity, you're gonna want to have a bullpen where you try to throw as hard as you can, okay? And you can even put this on the same day as your pull downs. Do I recommend this all the time for a lot of guys? Maybe not, but if your arm is built up to it, then you can absolutely do this. But anyway, throwing a high intensity bullpen, again, just goes back to the core principle of why we want to throw hard in the first place. We want to mold our mechanics into high velocity mechanics. We need to teach our body to actually move fast, okay? To move fast on the mound and deliver all of this force into the baseball so we can throw 90, okay? That's high intent bullpens. Now, flat grounds and short box. I know that this video is about throwing 90. I know that we've talked mostly about just velocity so far, but we still want to maintain good mechanics, right? So the drills that we end up actually doing, right? the small mechanical tweaks we actually make, we're going to want to implement those into our flat grounds and our short box, right? Because I'm not saying don't worry about mechanics at all, completely throw them out the window. That's not what I'm saying. But when we are implementing those mechanical changes, flat grounds and short boxes are a great place to do that, right? Because think about it, they're not going to be high intent days. They're going to be more so days that we just focus on fine tuning things, right? And you can even throw your off speed pitches during this time too. But that's going to wrap up throwing. Let's move on to lifting, right? Everybody loves to hit the weight room, okay? Guys love to go rip their pre-workout and go hit the gym for 2 hours, and that's fine. That's fine. I got no problem with that. But less is actually going to be more, okay? So this might be a heartbreak to some of you meatheads, but to be honest with you, less is going to be more in regards to lifting when you want to throw a baseball hard, right? So what do I mean by this? A lot of guys like to go to the gym 5, 6, even 7 days a week, and that's great from, you know, just a work ethic standpoint, but there comes a point where there's actually diminishing returns, right? So lifting is not the most important piece to throwing harder, okay? For some guys it might be, but lifting isn't necessarily going to translate to you throwing 90 miles per hour, right? If you just start picking up weights, then you're not automatically going to throw 90. That's what I have down here. You can't lift your way to 90, sorry. But we want to be hitting the gym about 3 to 4 times a week, okay? I would say 4 is the max, okay? And what this split could look like, you could possibly do an upper day Monday, a lower day Tuesday, off Wednesday, back to upper body Thursday, and then you can do a Friday total body. However you see fit, right? And doing the lifts that actually matter, which brings me to my next point. Compounds are gonna be king. Yes, this is 100% true in regards to pitching, okay? I don't care what anyone says, you can bench press, okay? You can deadlift, you can squat. Am I a huge fan of the back squat? No, I like to program front squats and box squats, to be honest with you. I think there's just a little bit too much injury risk when it comes to back squats, but I'll cover that in another video. Okay, compounds are king. Why are they king? Because if you haven't really lifted before and you're trying to throw a baseball 90 miles per hour, strength is going to be one of your lowest hanging fruits, okay? And the best way to get stronger is by getting strong at the compound lifts first. Now, I'm not saying those are the only lifts to do, but they're a really, really good place to start. Me personally, when I was throwing my hardest, that's when I benched the most. The stronger you are here, the more force you're going to be able to deliver to the baseball. But that's not always the case, and I'm going to get to that in a minute, okay? So, compounds are king, okay? Full range of motion. Full range of motion. What does this mean? We want to be lifting to our muscles' full range of motion, right? So I was just talking about the bench press. When we do a bench press, we don't want to go down and stop here. We want to go all the way down to the point where our muscles are stretched to the max, and then we press. Why do we want to do this? Because in the throw, if you're actually throwing the right way, you're not going to stop your arm here. You want your arm to get fully retracted, and you want this pec to stretch out so you can use it to actually throw the baseball at a high velocity, okay? So we want to mimic this when we're actually doing our lifts. We want to go to full range of motion. Now that brings me to my next point. We want to train the same movement patterns that you're going to use on the field. I will say that again. You want to train the same movement patterns that you're going to use on the field. What does that mean? Okay, so for example, if I'm pitching, I'm in this position, okay? This is a movement pattern that I'm gonna see show up on the field in my delivery, okay? What's a lift that we can train that uses this same movement pattern? A reverse lunge, a step up, something like that. But my point being, we wanna get strong in the actual positions that we're gonna use on the field, right? So if we go back to the bench press, this, right, we're not directly doing this on the field, but we are bringing our arm back eccentrically, okay? We are doing that. So getting strong in those ranges of motion, in those movement patterns is going to be absolutely crucial for you to throw a baseball 90 miles per hour. Let's move on. Said it before, guys, but you can't just lift your way to 90 miles per hour. I know that's gonna be heartbreaking for a lot of you guys who love to go to the gym, and I get that. I was in your shoes once, but by you just lifting the house, you're not gonna be able to throw 90 miles per hour. And the reason being, right, the reason for that is because the same energy systems you use to lift heavy weight are not necessarily the same energy systems you use to deliver a baseball, right? And another thing is, when we go into the full range of motion thing, a lot of guys ego lifts and they don't use full range of motion. And then they wonder why they step on the mound and they throw 82 when they deadlift 600 pounds, right? It doesn't work like that. Which brings me to my next category, mobility, okay? This is going to be huge. I've seen so many guys neglect their mobility, get injured from it. They're not able to unlock their full potential. I've seen bad things happen from neglecting mobility, okay? So this is how you actually go about it. You wanna focus on soft tissue first, okay? So quality of your actual tissues. What do I mean by this? Your muscles are wrapped in fascia, okay? And a lot of guys are extremely tight because their fascia gets knotted up, okay? So how do we actually unknot, per se, this fascia so we can get full range of motion and good mobility? Well, we do soft tissue work, okay? If you've never done soft tissue work before, basically it's where you get a modality like a lacrosse ball or a tennis ball or a foam roller, and you attack that spot that's tight, right? So for example, a lot of guys get super, super tight in their teres, right? I still do to this day. So what do? You take a tennis ball, a lacrosse ball, a foam roller, and you work that area out, okay? And it's not gonna be a one-day transformation. It's not gonna be a 1 hour transformation. It's gonna take a couple days for that muscle to actually relax, for that fascia to release, and then you can start going into more active mobility stretches, okay? But we wanna address that tissue quality first. Now, you probably have a good idea of where you're tight. A lot of guys come to me and say their hips are super tight or their hamstrings are tight. Well, take that lacrosse ball, take that tennis ball, take that foam roller, and work those areas out before you just hop into the next mobility routine that you see. Please, deep ranges of motion and weighted mobility, okay? So this is a little bit more down the line after you actually address that movement quality, right? So we wanna get that fascia loosened up, and then we can start going into those deeper ranges of motion and using weighted mobility, okay? Why do we want to use weighted mobility and deep ranges of motion, right? Kind of goes back to this principle here. Full range of motion, train the same movement patterns that you're going to move on that you're going to use on the field, okay? So getting into deep ranges of motion, even passively, can help a lot. So using weights to assist you in your mobility puts you into those deeper ranges of motion, and then you're able to access them more. But once you access them, that's half the battle. Now you need to be able to get out of them, right? Which brings me to my next point here. Great, but we need to be able to actually move out of those positions. So how do you do that? You get better at those weighted stretches and you actually lift through those full range of motion too, right? So for example, if I'm doing, say, a weighted groin stretch, right, to work on my hip flexors, maybe I'll superset that with weighted internal rotation, right? So I got into that deep range of motion externally, and now I need to be able to apply that force in an internal rotation pattern because that's what you're gonna go into when you rotate your hips down the mound, right? So my point is, it's great to get into these deeper ranges of motion, but we have to actually be able to get out of them, right? So that's why all of this stuff is compounding and super important. Arguably the most important and most overlooked, in my opinion, speed and plyometrics, right? So if you are not genetically gifted, if you're not a genetically gifted athlete, you're gonna have to establish a baseline level of athleticism, okay? This is where I went wrong in my career. This is where I see a lot of guys go wrong. They just maybe aren't the most genetically gifted and they think they can overlook this stuff, right? They think they can overlook the sprints, the plyometrics, all of that. No, that is what builds your base as an athlete, right? Like just going out and playing baseball, sure, it'll make you a little bit more athletic, right? Playing other sports, yeah, it'll make you more athletic, but doing, oh, it's a freaking butterfly. Doing sprints, doing different variations of sprints at shorter distances, that stuff is gonna build the engine that makes you a good athlete. And at the end of the day, be able to throw 90 plus miles per hour, okay? So when it comes to sprints, what should those actually look like? Well, we wanna be doing sprints in different variations, right? So if we think objectively about what the pitching delivery is, it's an extremely short, quick burst of energy, okay? So we want our sprints to mimic this. So doing sprints and variations like the half kneeling sprint, the push-up start sprint, things like that, that's putting us in a position where we have to apply a lot of force and a lot of energy in a short window, just like we're doing on the mound, okay? So we want this to mimic what we're doing on the mound. A big concept that we see, at least in these three categories right here, is training what we're doing on the field. I cannot stress that enough. We need to train in a way that we can apply it directly to what we're doing on the field, okay? Very important. Okay, med balls. Med balls, this one, maybe not as overlooked, but I threw it in anyway because it's very important, right? Med balls, we want to train that rotational power, okay? So think about it. When you are going down the mound, you want to train this move here, your rotation. The best way to do that without actually doing throwing drills, right? Because you can't throw a baseball all the time, is with med balls, right? So if we have an 8-pound to 10-pound med ball, 12, 14 pounds, whatever, and you're able to move through this same range of motion, this same movement pattern, right, rotating down the mound with that load, once you do it with a baseball, it's gonna be a lot easier and your body's gonna be used to producing a lot more force with that movement pattern, right? Because we just did it with 10, 12, 14, 20 pounds. Now we're just doing it with a baseball in our hand, right? And you can even do these med ball drills off the mound. In fact, I recommend it, right? Blend those med ball drills with your actual throw so you can start to bridge the gap between, oh, I can do this with a med ball, and oh, I can do this with a baseball in my hand too, right? That's gonna be super, super important, okay? Last thing, jumping, ground force production. Whenever we pitch, we need to be putting a lot of force into the ground, right? Both horizontal and linear, right? So our jumping, our plyometrics need to reflect this. We wanna be doing box jumps, we wanna be doing broad jumps, we wanna be doing lateral broad jumps, lateral bounds, things that actually put our body into a position where we need to produce all of this ground force, right? Another one that I love is jumping rope. Jumping rope will help you train your sequencing too. Jumping rope is one of the best exercises you can do, not only as a pitcher, but as an athlete in general, right? Jumping rope's awesome. But in general, we want to be training that ground force production by doing these jumps, okay? It is super, super important. So at the end of the day, you guys can take all of these concepts, apply them into your actual training routine, and definitely be able to throw harder than you're throwing now. Hopefully all of that made sense to you guys and you can take this and learn something from it. At the end of the day, I just want to help as many people throw 90 as possible. And I'm currently doing that through my remote academy where guys like Sebastian, guys like Kyle have gained at least 3 to 5 miles per hour in the first 2 months of working with me and are throwing harder every day. If you want to know what that looks like, if you want to train one-on-one with me, you can book a call with me in the description down below. But until then, I will see you guys next time.